Thank you very much for that really lengthy introduction. I think before getting started with what I have to say today, I'm trying to be a storyteller. I am not sure I can be as agile and as interesting as Denka in the previous session, while also the other part is I'm following Ngawang, whose pictures and his presentation is so good that I'm not even going to compare. My little sister warned me last night that her boss was also on the same panel and that he's going to outshine me. So I said, I brought my bag, I'll let my bag outshine me. Do the shining for me. So that's the sort of aside that. But Dr. Yella, you don't have to be scared of me. I don't bite, I don't, honest to goodness. People, my colleagues at Tarayana, some of them have called me very nice names, like Amdosisi or Amkaktang, Amkaktar. But I guess that's part of the journey of building a civil society organization from the grounds up, of course with the blessings of our founder and president, Her Majesty Ajdojo Mo'onshu, but building something from ground zero was quite an interesting journey. And you had to be all that and more. You wear whatever cap that is necessary to be worn to get the job done, and I hope today my role as a storyteller, that I'll fit that cap at least a little bit, that I won't be so off. They gave me a free hand to talk about rural development and climate change. And how do we talk about climate change and rural development without really going into their lived realities, their lived experiences of our small and scattered communities high up in the mountains? I don't have pictures to back me up, but you've seen pictures all day long of the difficult, the localities, the geographical difficulties, the isolation factors, the transportation difficulties. All of that has been already flashed before you. So I would like to get you to start getting your recollection. When I talk, just imagine these communities are scattered amongst those mountains. And so this is about building human resilience. And my young colleague in the earlier session already mentioned about depending on our engineers, our Bhutanese engineers that got us this far. We have to still bank on that, utilize the wisdom that has been sifted and garnered through all of these centuries of how to survive in this, at times hostile environment, at times very gentle and loving. So how did we as a people respond to all these risks and factors of actually making a living out in the middle of the Himalayas? So if you dish that in favor of just what you learn at universities and what you're schooled in schools, then I think we would be doing a great disservice to our own heritage of how we are innovators and how we are survivors and how we are, independently aware, the self-awareness of each Bhutanese, of the pride with which we walk. And all that is fine. I mean, you might be materially poor, but we are culturally rich. We are rich in the environmental knowledge, the heritage of what my colleague earlier mentioned about the unseen forces that still support us and support our lives and livelihoods, our actions on this planet. In a very nice dance of sorts, you respect them, they respect you. We make sure that we look after our local environment, and the environment, in fact, blesses us with the bounties be it through produced products, the non-wood forest products, on which many of our small communities still rely on quite significantly. So our GDP is nothing to shout from the rooftops. The demands of a younger generation. I mean, if you look at, paraphrasing what Gandhi has said about God provides for your needs, but human greed, that's a whole different ball game. So if you look at being responsible consumers, I think it's very, very important for us to remember that we are also, our younger generation, in fact, are put in a very hard place right now, because on the one hand, we have a tradition that says, be humble, be kind, be compassionate. These are our values. These are some of the best qualities of what makes us Bhutanese. But at the same time, you are assessed on performance, your competition of getting ahead of what you earn, what you drive, where you live. So if you're positioned in that, our youth are at that crossroads, and our rural youth are no different. I know of several families from rural Bhutan, from some of our small pockets. They would like to send their kids also out so that they are not left behind. Now, that's a very serious issue for the small communities, because sometimes these are the first generation college goers. So then the rest are saying, if that is what they're learning in schools, if that is what they are being taught, of getting ahead is more important, being right is more important than being kind. If those are the things that are going to shape the future of Bhutan, then they would rather not send their kids to school. So now, after making all this progress of getting everyone to go to school, and then we have a scenario where parents are stepping back and saying, well, I think we are doing something wrong here. What is it that we're doing wrong? Why are our children gravitating towards, the rest of the world? And the clear answer is digitization of everything. Now information is in the phones, in their hands, and parents don't know how to monitor the content. And so sort of all of that is very, very true in rural Bhutan. Maybe the urban Bhutan, the parents are at least educated, they can guide their children, hopefully. In rural Bhutan, parents can no longer tell their children not to look at their screen, because most of the work now needs to be done online. And the pandemic taught us that having connectivity is important, and therefore every family, whether they could afford it or not, had to cough up and buy them a smartphone so that they don't miss out on school. But side by side, where is the guidance of what they look at, what they spend their time on? All of that was missing. And so we are coming into a time where our own rural communities find that their traditional knowledge is now no longer sufficient to guide the younger generation, because they are coming at it from all sorts of things. And that's where people like us from the Tarayana, we have lots of volunteers and lots of school programs, lots of engagement with local communities, just sort of to make sure at least the people we come in contact with, we can say, we value what you know, we have to help document all of that, make it still available. All these kids are, okay, they've gone for the time being, but they'll come back to their roots. I personally feel that the Bhutanese rooting instinct is so strong that wherever they fly off to any part of the world, Bhutan will still be where they call home, and they would be home to roost. And so, in the meantime, we have to honor the communities and the elders in the communities who have looked after our culture, our heritage, and their knowledge that has been transferred orally from generation to generation. And all of a sudden, just because now the younger generation is being schooled and they feel what they learn from books is more important. This is the truth that's written in the books, and therefore this is more important than what you have to tell me that's just hearsay. So if we start devaluing our own traditional wisdom, the capacity to look at the formation of clouds and just say, okay, tomorrow we're going to have a really strong gusty wind or whatever. Now, as Dr. Ngawang pointed out, that is also out of their capacity now because of severe climate change effects in these small pockets where they're unable to predict what might happen this season or what might happen tomorrow, for instance. So yesterday, I don't know, those of you who were in Thimphu must have experienced the fire, the cause of which we are still not clear, but there was this tremendous fire that clouded the entire city, and it was almost around 2 o'clock, it was almost like dusk, and we had a really, really orange sun. For a few hours there, it looked like everything was burning up. But we realized that the fire that started just above Depsi had gone all the way across to Kunsepotang, above the Buddha Dharma statue and things like that. So, big cause of concern for a few hours, gusty winds. But if this is supposed to be what climate change will throw up, and Doctor mentioned that fires, when he mentioned that, I just thought of what had happened yesterday, and I thought maybe there is something going on there. How do we prepare small local communities to take care of themselves? How do we build their resilience? Not by giving them a hand out, because that is sort of the easier thing to do, but really embracing them and ensuring that they are empowered to look after themselves. And in that light, the housing is where resilience we learned through trial and error, and we found that giving each community member, each family, a decent home to live in. We're not talking about a mansion or a villa or anything like that, just basic structure to keep the elements out, and they walk straighter. They take greater pride in keeping their surroundings clean. You don't have to tell them plant flowers. They're already planting them. And so it's a sense of pride that they can walk and they can say, they can bring their friends over. There used to be a saying that in some of these rural communities, when visitors or government officials went to these areas, they wouldn't find the villagers there, they would just find their empty huts. And the reason being that they were too poor and too ashamed to welcome anyone home because they didn't have much to offer. And so that used to be a problem in the earlier engagements, I guess. But for Tarayana, that wasn't, we never went to a village and went away within an hour or two or whatever. We stayed with them. Every single day, our field officers go visit them, and so initial engagement, the consultation process is very interesting, and I felt I should share this with the gathering here, because it's very interesting that they know exactly what they feel that the government agencies want to hear. So their response is in line, and then the officers from various departments who come and try to assess their requirements, they go back happy that they've consulted the community. But is that their top priority? Because we were on the ground for a longer period with them, we'll say, but why did you ask for that? Listen, that's the only thing they can give us. So, but that isn't your top priority. Couldn't you request, reformulate, ask for what you really want? And because government agencies work, ministries work in, their budget is meant only for X, Y, Z. Now, a case in point, long ago, I think we had projects that promoted sanitation and things like that in the villages in Shemgang. Very good project, very successfully implemented. But when we went visiting these communities, we found that these, which were built as toilets, were not used for that purpose. They were still going behind the bushes, but this was the best place where they could store their grains. It was cemented, had a concrete, the CGI sheets, so well protected. So they kept it under lock and key and used it as storage. So that, I mean, therefore, taught us a lot of lessons. I worked in the government for almost 16 years, so I know we were also responsible for some decisions like that, where the cow sheds were cemented and the people still lived in little huts with banana leaves and next to nothing. So we told them that maybe their animals were more important than them. Was that the message? I guess the intentions were all good, but wrongly placed, maybe. So the sequencing was very, very important. So you consult with them, get the true picture of what they want. And most of the times, it's not what they want is not just money or a handout. They just want you to show them how to get things done. And so that was where our housing program was very, very effective, because we didn't build the homes for them. They built it themselves, but we handheld them and took them through the different stages of getting their permissions and the permits for timber, for land measurement, the whole host of other burdens that an ordinary rural community member found very, very insurmountable to handle on their own. So we formed these groups, and very egalitarian manner, very democratically, they selected whose house would be built. They would either draw straws or, die with the roll of a dice. They'd decide who would go first and things like that. So we let them devise their own. So every village, a little differently, but more or less along that same. You put them in charge. You give them, you empower them, and let them take that forward. And so that was the only way we were able to achieve what we achieved in improving the housing area, where I think more than 2,500 houses and counting. I mean, if we are slow, it's only because of lack of funds for the CGI roofs and some skilled labor that goes in. So the one other aspect, I think, since it's climate change, and I thought it's relevant, water, you read every day in the newspaper, some article or the other on water sources drying up. And sometimes our community members are able to connect that this development, this road came along, and then our water dried up. So linking became quite important, and also for them to recognize when there is a development plan being put in place, that they should be able to raise their concerns, discuss it thoroughly, because the planners who come in, they just come in and they need to get the job done. They don't know the local realities better than the locals themselves. So the locals should be brought on board was something that we advocated for rather strongly. And having them on board then helps them also. They are getting listened to. These dialogues help them at least articulate their concerns and prevent building where the major catchment area or where the stream flows and things like that. So those things are already eliminated. But more importantly, moving forward, we, from the government side, I think with concentrating mostly on looking at watersheds, and there are programs that help look at watersheds. We have to also ensure that local community members understand what it means. How does the spring shed, what does it mean for areas to be marked off as catchment area, how to protect it, recharge area. And I think if you demystify these things and show them in common, practical, actionable points, they take to it like fish to water, because they know it's for their own sustenance that water is important, that they are empowered to look after it, that they have the ultimate say on whether the source that they're tapping from can be tapped by other communities who don't, the environmental services and things like that. So these little negotiation skills, I think, are all it takes to empower local communities, giving them the respect and giving them a hands-up approach, and really valuing their traditional knowledge and co-creating local solutions I think is the only way forward in fight against climate change, or at least in our adaptation plans. I think if we bring them in as a last-minute added-on afterthought, then it would not work. You have to have them at the drawing boards when you're planning the activities, so that they are also in a position to decide the level of burden that they can pick up. So that's it for now. I could go on, but I can see my really irritated husband at the back showing, So I've got to stop here now.